It is the pitiful beggar child, moreover blind. The indistinct, tattered pants and a color impossible to determine suggest not only humans, but even the dogs despise him. The black sleeves of his shirt, shiny from constant use as mucus-wiping cloths, reveal a face that is hungry, emaciated, and, most strikingly, too vacant. Terrifyingly wide eye sockets, perhaps intentionally, he showcases his pitiable appearance, hoping for sympathy due to his blindness. He relies on a stick, an old bamboo cane with a worn-down thumb-size tip, smooth and as thin as he is. After cautiously tapping the ground twice, he takes a step. He moves silently under the scorching sun, wearing a tattered straw hat tilted backward, exposing a face of skeletal hunger, sunburn, and, most notably, two gaping, eerie eye sockets that intensify his frightful demeanor. The loincloth, also made of straw, clings closer to his body, emphasizing his emaciation even more. No one knows where he came from, first, because this is the first time he appeared in the upper village. Second, simply because individuals like him are not deemed worthy of attention. At that moment, under the harsh midday sun, no one was nearby except another ragged boy of similar age, though healthier and more lively due to not begging for a living. This boy carelessly was squatting, trying to flick a glass marble into a small hole beneath the shade of a truncated banyan tree. At the edge of the village, he was frustrated that the marble wouldn't land in the hole. In his disappointment, he was about to stand up and leave for lunch when he suddenly noticed the miserable beggar. Something about the beggar's appearance, combined with his hesitant, two steps, one tap walking pattern, struck the boy as both amusing and discomforting. The white, blank eyes irritated him further, as if the marble he lost had somehow rolled into the beggar's eye sockets. A mischievous thought sparked, quietly and stealthily. Like a cat stalking its prey, he approached the beggar, snatched the bamboo stick, and darted toward the banyan tree. The beggar cried out, his thin voice echoing in futile distress as he reached out helplessly. "Whoever took my stick, please give it back. Don't play like this. Give it back." His voice was feeble, likely due to hunger, waiting in vain for someone to return his stick. He reluctantly continued to grope forward, adopting a comical posture, as if he were maintaining balance on a tightrope in a circus. Now, instead of tapping the stick, he cautiously felt the ground with his foot twice before each step. This way, he could avoid stumbling, but unfortunately, what mattered most to him was the direction, not the method. The direction he was heading was now towards the deep, wide well in the heart of the upper village. Sitting under the banyan tree, the marble playing boy watched with fascination. In other villages, wells were always surrounded by brick edges for understandable reasons, surprisingly. For generations, the well in the upper village lacked such protective borders and was positioned right next to the path, leading to several instances of children, even cattle falling in, yet, due to the well's proximity to the populated area, they were always rescued in time. The beggar's plight was dire. He also stumbled and fell into the well, dying because the well's edge, without brick lining, was slippery and offered nothing to hold on to. Weakened by hunger and with no one around to rescue him, he perished. As for the mischievous marble-playing boy, witnessing the scene filled him with fear, prompting him to run home. His incident occurred several decades ago, but the residents of the upper village still remember, and not just remember. 3 days passed before the body of the beggar boy surfaced. He was buried in the Dong Kua cemetery, much like how they buried many homeless people who died of hunger before him. However, his grave was slightly smaller, as he was just a child. Surprisingly, what puzzled everyone was that his small grave seemed to grow larger each day, to the point where it overshadowed the grand tomb of the most influential family ancestor in the village. Normally, people rejoice in such cases. A growing grave is synonymous with prosperity, wealth, and good fortune, but in this case, it was the grave of a beggar child. So what could possibly flourish his begging profession? The village authorities couldn't hide their vague concerns about an impending disaster. Eventually, that disaster came. After several years of failed harvests due to natural disasters, many villagers from Thong had to resort to begging abroad initially. People didn't pay much attention to this phenomenon, as begging was not uncommon. However, when the number of beggars increased alarmingly, people began to connect it to the growing grave of the beggar boy. Why were neighboring villages suffering from famine as well? But not many of their residents resorted to the shameful profession of begging. Perhaps this was the vengeful consequence of that beggar boy. To alleviate the impending disaster, they built a concrete tomb for him, now referred to as Mr. Several years later, they constructed a proper shrine with an altar, carefully offering incense on specific occasions and following rituals. Gradually, as people realized that begging brought neither financial gain nor social acceptance, the beggars from Thong had official certificates from the commune, along with a shiny red stamp. The pitiful beggar child became the village's unexpected benefactor, replacing a renowned general from the time of the Lamak dynasty. Slowly but surely in the folklore, the village's name changed. It became the village of beggars. I am that mischievous marble-playing boy, sir, Mr. Mush. He sighed and said, Dotmer. Mush was my neighbor in the sense of living next door, not because my writing profession and his thriving scrap metal trade had anything in common. He admired me for my many words. I associated with him because he had a lot of money and didn't bother me, and also because he agreed to take turns paying for drinks at the New Wine Tavern near the Long Bean Bridge. He had long been known for his kindness, a true philanthropist. Perhaps he had donated tens, if not hundreds, of millions of dong to various charitable causes, always directed towards blind children. Kansas school considered him a benefactor. Some other visually impaired schools in different areas felt the same. Back then, I didn't dare let anyone know that I had caused the death of the beggar child. He continued after taking a long sip of beer. I regretted it and was scared. Fortunately, my father, a high-ranking official at the General Statistics Office, moved the whole family to live in the city the next month. Since then, I've never dared to return to Thong Village. You know why? Nevertheless, I know everything that happened in the village. Let me ask you honestly, do you believe in superstition? No, I replied. Do you believe in retribution, karma? I don't believe. Why are you asking, do you believe? No, I don't. Mr. Mush fell into contemplation for a moment, then spoke with a melancholic demeanor. It's both and neither, but I just feel it, especially recently. Maybe I'm getting old and indulging in delusions. Don't laugh, but every night when I sleep, I hear the sound of that beggar boy's bamboo stick and his feeble cries, "Someone, please return my stick." Don't joke. The situation seems to be getting worse. I don't know what to do. Can you advise me on what to do now? I sat silently, unsure of how to respond. Or maybe you should see a neurologist, I finally suggested. These times are stressful for everyone. I'm no better. As for the beggar boy, it might just be your imagination. Given that you think about him so much, I consoled, although I knew there was something more serious and terrifying here. A few days later, persuaded by Mr. Mush's insistence and out of curiosity, I agreed to accompany him to Thong Village, the village of beggars. Mr. Mush lit incense, murmuring prayers in front of the makeshift altar dedicated to the village's benefactor. Before that, I had also lit one to commemorate the unfortunate soul of the beggar boy. I discreetly stepped outside, giving Mr. Mush some privacy to repent, hoping he would find some relief with his inherent kindness and past charitable deeds. He deserved a peaceful old age. That night, we stayed at a distant relative's house of Murdat Mush. It was a sturdy tiled house with a TV, radio, and even a car, a Japanese one, not a shabby Chinese model. Although the people of Thong Village no longer resorted to begging, they still respectfully worshipped and offered to their ancestral beggar lord. His grave had grown into a small mound, and children dared not let their cattle trample upon it. At midnight, while deeply asleep after a challenging day on the road, Mr. Mush shook my shirt forcefully. In his panic, he whispered, "Look over there. It's him, who?" I asked in surprise, since I saw nothing. The village benefactor, the beggar boy. Mr. Mush didn't finish his sentence. He immediately fell to the ground, bowing repeatedly. "I beg for your forgiveness. Yes, I beg for your forgiveness. I was foolish. I was just joking. I was still a child back then. I beg for your forgiveness. I beg for your forgiveness." "What's happening, Mr. Mush?" I tried to help him up, but he wouldn't allow it. "I don't see anything. Whom are you bowing to?" I couldn't see anything, but Mr. Mush continued his earnest supplications. Although I didn't believe in ghosts and wasn't one to be easily frightened, a chill ran down my spine a moment later. Mr. Mush fell silent, sitting on the floor, sighing heavily. He's gone, left without saying a word. It means he didn't forgive me. Oh God, what should I do now? At this point, I approached the light switch to turn on the lights. Mush remained silent, sitting on the floor with a vacant expression. Finally, as if confirming the real presence of someone, he turned to me and revealed a gleaming glass marble under the light. He left this asterisk after that incident. I went on a business trip for 3 months. Upon my return, I learned that Mr. Mush had passed away. People said he had gone insane, begging for food everywhere like a beggar. His descendants confined him at home and even in a mental hospital. But he continued begging from everyone he encountered. Some offered him a stone, and he gratefully thanked them. Moved to tears, one day, he cleverly escaped from the hospital. By evening, someone found him dead next to a small mud pond near the bridge. Surprisingly, despite the pond being mostly mud with little water, he didn't sink. People said he had gone insane, begging for food everywhere like a beggar. His descendants confined him at home and even in a mental hospital. But he continued begging from everyone he encountered. Some offered him a stone, and he gratefully thanked them. Moved to tears, one day, he cleverly escaped from the hospital. By evening, someone found him dead next to a small mud pond near the bridge. Surprisingly, despite the pond being mostly mud with little water, he didn't sink. Strangely, he died while wearing a tattered loincloth tightly clinging to his armpits, holding the smooth bamboo stick, things no one had seen him with before. A person of virtue like him dying in such a way is truly pitiful, said the neighborhood leader, with a heavy heart, as they prepared to put him in the coffin. It seemed that the beggar boy, as mentioned, N.M.R. Mush's narrative had returned and led him, just as he had done before,